Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to share my thoughts on the deck I ran in the World Championship GOAT format tournament this past weekend. I'm sure some people were, curious why I decided to play Warriors of all decks, um, and I will talk about that today. So the backstory leading up to the tournament is I got my invite at the Grand Prix in Fort Worth, Texas. I live in Florida, so I actually flew out for that event. I have a good friend that lives in Dallas, and that's about a 25-minute drive from the tournament venue. So I figured, why not fly out and have some fun? I had a place to stay for free, and I haven't played GOATs in person in a really long time, and I figured I would have a lot of friends at the event, so went for it, and just so happened I ended up winning it. So I had an invite to the World Championship. A couple weeks prior, I was really torn on whether or not I wanted to play. I have a lot of things going on in my personal life already, and leading up to the event, just had a lot of life tough things happening, and I really wasn't mentally feeling it. JDZ was really encouraging me to play. He's been very supportive in trying to get me to play in a lot more of these events. I usually decline, but I finally played in this one. 2 days prior, you might have seen a post I made, and I decided I wasn't going to play. And then the very next day, they released the prize support, and it was pretty decent. And I justified. I was like, okay. I was like, well, there's a degree of GOATs I like playing, and usually I do not justify it because I don't see the incentive compared to other activities I can do in my life. But given there was a little bit extra incentive, I was like, you know what, let's just do it. I had some pretty traumatic stuff happen to me a couple of days prior that made me not want to play, but I ended up pulling it together, and I was like, you know what, let's just do this, and let's just set aside our world for a couple of days and just focus on this thing. So day before, I tested a bunch of different decks, and I don't want to go too much into detail about it, but you can read my interview on goatformat.com. I kind of detail it a little bit in there. But anyways, I test a whole bunch of different decks, and I start gravitating more towards Chaos Turbo, and then I play a couple people who seem like they kind of know what they're doing, and I just realized, man, I'm so out of shape when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! That if I get into these mirror matches, I'm very liable just to make lots of mistakes. So I just figured that because I hadn't prepared as much as I would have liked to for an event to play in, I usually like to be very prepared. I'm very much a perfectionist, and that's part of the reason I don't like playing GOAT too much, is because I don't prioritize the time for it at this stage of my life, so I feel like I will underperform, and for me it just hurts so much. It's so hard for me to lose and then not do something about it. I'm the type of person that I want to solve the problem and just improve upon it. So anyways, all that out of the way, I end up deciding on Warrior, and long story short is Warrior is it's a much simpler strategy. It creates simplified game states where you're usually functioning with 5 to 6 cards max, on both ends. That's the ideal place. Once the game gets dragged out into a long game, it's not looking good for Warriors, because a lot of the Warriors they really specialize on leveraging certain game states and limiting what your opponent can do. So when your opponent gets too many options, it starts to make the Warrior engine very inefficient. So I figured that in a tournament where I'm not going to have a huge skill edge, I figured that playing a deck that would allow me to not get into like very complicated situations where I was liable to make mistakes was going to be beneficial to me at this point. When I played in Grand Prix Texas, I chose Chaos Turbo, and that was partly because I thought the deck was the best deck, and I still kind of think Chaos generally, like, some variant of Chaos is typically the best deck. But in Grand Prix Texas, I was playing in person also, which kind of helps. I can like kind of feel out the situation a bit more, and also you're not playing against only people who got invites to the tournament. So when you're playing in Worlds, you're playing with only people who are at least like decent to reasonably good or very good, right? So in that situation, if I have a skill disadvantage, it's really going to show. But in a live tournament where anyone can enter, anything's up for anything can happen. So it's not like I'm playing against world class players at a Grand Prix. Whereas like in the World Championship, I'm expecting to play against more people who know what they're doing. So I don't want to put myself into situations where I'm going to make big mistakes. So let's just take a look at the deck I played. All right, so this is the deck list that I ended up running. It was based off of SD Killa's list that he got second place with in the Clash of Champions. Basically, I made a few changes. I think I took out one Dust Shoot, and I took out one Dust Tornado, and I added a Zambira, and I added, I think, a Book of Moon, and that was largely because I was expecting more like scapegoat-based decks running Metamorphosis to bring out Thousand Eyes. So I wanted to have more main deck outs. Prior to the tournament, I was panicking, and I was swapping between playing a second Dust Shoot, second Dust Tornado, second Jar of Greed. I ended up on the second Jar of Greed. I think it's fine, but I think in the future I would play a second Dust Shoot. Part of the reason I didn't want to run double Dust Shoot was, if I'm being completely honest, is the timing issue. I didn't want to get into a bunch of situations in the tournament where like someone could potentially take advantage of me for not like timing my Dust Shoot correctly. Because, say like if I just flipped it immediately, they could just say like, oh, like I wanted to claim priority and then like play an MST from hand or something, and then I'm kind of screwed. I mean, you can get around that, and now that I played in the tournament, and have more experience like playing with the online dynamic, I probably would just play the Dust Shoot and just do the proper procedure in the situation and just make sure like, okay, if somebody exits their draw phase, then that's indicating that they're leaving their draw phase and they've passed priority to me, so then I can play my Dust Shoot. I didn't really know those kind of protocols prior to the tournament, and that's kind of why I was trying to like avoid certain situations like that, because I didn't feel comfortable. So it's not like the best reasoning, if I'm being honest, but I honestly had very, very low expectations for the event. I was playing just to kind of just see what would happen, and it's kind of the reason I chose the Warrior deck list in the first place, was just because, like I said, it's a very simple strategy. You just kind of just have to like get in there and bum rush your opponent. I mean, to a degree, you need to play around certain things like Torrential Mirror for the most part, but there's even a lot of situations where I feel like you kind of have to just apply pressure, and if they have it, they have it, because if you don't do that, then it gives your opponent too many turns to draw into outs and out your deck. So to a certain degree, like Warrior just kind of has to play like an overly aggressive play style, which not a huge fan of that. But I will say the Warrior deck was actually a lot better than I was expecting. And there were some really cool takeaways, I would say. Some of the takeaways out specifically was I really liked the synergy between Kaiku and Mystic Swordsman level 2. One of my favorite opening plays in the Warrior deck is to summon Kaiku and then have a Warrior level 2 on the ready, so either through Rhoda or one in hand, something like that, and then some type of like spell and trap removal with a defensive trap. It's pretty good because you immediately get to get a +1 through your Swordsman. You get to remove any lights and darks to kind of maintain the control of the graveyard, and then your opponent kind of has to deal with that lock. So if I was to make some edits to this deck, I think I would try to find room for a second swordsman and maybe a third Kaiku. I think Zambira is probably a pretty poor choice in the main deck at this stage because of Warrior just not having much of a presence in the metagame. So I think I would probably drop the Zambira and find room for second second Dust Shoot, probably even second Dust Tornado. I think the Jars could come out completely, and I think Donzalug, even though Donzalug did put in some work, I think that it's possible to drop Donzalug for either a second Swordsman or maybe a Sasuke, but probably a second Swordsman before Sasuke, in my opinion. And then the upstarts may or may not. I'm not sure how I feel about them. Like I do like them. There's a lot of situations in the tournament where the very next card in my deck was like a Pot of Greed or a Charity, which having the upstart get me to those cards on turn 1 or 2 was really, really important because it allowed me to set like Solemns and like a big back row to be able to counter whatever my opponent did to me, and then it reinforced aggressive pushes with the Warrior lineup. So I really did actually like the upstarts. I think they're pretty good, and I definitely do fall into the camp of double upstart in basically any deck. I just feel like there's like no reason not to play double upstart. It allows you to get to your power cards a turn quicker, and seems like a really important thing in Yu-Gi-Oh. So briefly talking about the side deck. The side deck, there's some stuff I liked and didn't like. Personally, I don't really like Wombat or King Tiger or Wanghu very much. I don't like that both of them are vulnerable to aggression. So like when you're playing the Wombat against a Panda Burn deck, you have a 1600 dude who you need to like defend, and like Panda Burn can definitely get aggressive on you, and so like having a Des Wombat on field is not necessarily my favorite way to go. If I had more time to prepare, I might have chosen a different card. I was even thinking Solemn Wishes could be pretty good, but I'd have to think about it a bit more. I added Hysteric Fairy like last minute to the side deck because when I played a little bit against Panda Burn, Ojama Trio like really hurts the Warrior deck because very very quickly you get 1 or 2 creatures on the field, and if they trio you, it's just hard to do anything and put much pressure on them. So I thought the Hysteric Fairy would be like a really good addition. Berserk Gorilla I chose to use over I believe a second Kinetic, or maybe it was over a Zambira, basically just for like the Warrior matchup. I actually don't really like Berserk Gorilla all that much in hindsight, so I probably dropped this. The second Sasuke was just for people who are playing maybe Spirit Reapers or for game 2, because I expected a lot of spy action to be going on after game 2. So Sasuke I think could potentially be brought into the main even. In the side deck maybe it's not super great, but I think it's okay. The King Tigers, I don't really love them for the same reasons I don't love Des Wombat, is they're just really vulnerable. It was really annoying. Well, I guess it's not true. It can I was going to say Tsukiyomi screws it up, but it really doesn't because you can't summon it. Or it would be destroyed if you summon it. So that's not true, but what is true is a lot of times people side in things like Zambira or Berserk Gorilla. So you really need to defend these guys if you're going to play them, and it makes it just really hard, especially if they're playing Decree. That was the issue I ran into in the top 16 is the guy was main decking Decree. So when I bring in for game 2 and 3, you usually bring in like the third Saku because people are siding in like beat sticks, so you need to defend like your Wanghus and stuff, and you need ways to get rid of their beat sticks. So I didn't really like the Wanghus for that reason because it just makes Zambira that much better. So I'd probably find a different solution. Like I was even thinking Ashura could be good, and another one I really think might be very viable is either Big Bang Shot or Fairy Meteor Crush. I think both of those options are pretty good against decks playing Goat because it just turns all of your guys into like 2,000 attack piercing damage dudes. So if they leave 4 Goats on the field in 4 turns, they just die, which is pretty nice. So I think and if you play Fairy Meter Crush with a Shore Priest, you can potentially just OTK them in one shot if they use Goat against you. So I think those are kind of some ideas that I would consider. Cliff is just super super good. Yeah, I mean, there's not really much to be said. You need to play it if you're playing Warrior because it's a searchable spell and trap removal. It's really needed against like Royal Decree, stuff like that. Swordsman level 2, the second one on the side. I mean, I think it's debatable. I almost think just playing a second one in the main, though, would be pretty good. Kinetic Soldier is, I think, okay. Again, I don't think it's like that great. Good for the mirror match. But I kind of think there might be better solutions. And then My Body, I think, is actually quite good. Usually games 2 and 3. So actually, quickly, the My Body, I didn't really understand why people were side decking it at first, but I asked Ivan, and he helped me understand that people side in Sakus and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. So against Chaos Turbo, games 2 and 3, if they're playing Regeki Break and then they side in Sakus, you now have a bunch of targets to negate with your My Body. You have 3 Sakus, you have like 2 to 3 Regeki Breaks, you have Mirror, you have Torrential, you have Tribe Infecting Virus, so it's actually a really, really great card, and I think I would probably side deck a second one moving forward. Compulsory Evacuation Device was a card I really, really regret playing. I was partially influenced by my friend Kyle. He was telling me the day before / the couple days before, that he thought Compulse was really good because of Thousand Eyes Restrict and all these things. And initially, this was a second Book of Moon in the side deck, but I was influenced by my friend, and I was like, well, I guess it kind of makes sense because it's kind of like a My Body in a sense where like you can save your own monster. It's kind of like a Book of Moon. You can get rid of Thousand Eyes Restrict. So I ended up dropping. I think initially I dropped the second My Body for a Book of Moon, and then I was like, well, Compulse is like a Book of Moon and a My Body, but it's really not, because in reality, Compulse is like nowhere near as good as Book of Moon, because when you're getting like obliterated by a Tsukiyomi from your opponent, Compulse doesn't help you at all. Book of Moon, like you want to get Tsukiyomi face down so you can attack over it. And also sometimes the Thousand Eyes Restricts, the decks that play them use Royal Decree, so Compulse just becomes worse in that situation as well. So I really would not use Compulse. I don't like it. Dust Tornado, I mean, you just need to play a second or third copy somewhere in the list. Dust Shoot's clearly good against certain matchups, so I think it's pretty solid. I think it's possibly better to play 2 in the main deck and then games 2 and 3 potentially side them out. One issue I ran into actually in day 2 in the losers bracket playing against Ace, he was very, very good about keeping his hand under 4 cards. Like it was like his life's mission to never have 4 cards in hand, I noticed. He was just like hard discarding all of his Thunder Dragons and stuff. So he was really just trying not to get dust shooted. So I think that dust shoot can potentially be pretty dead games 2 and 3 depending on who you're playing against. So I'm not sure how I feel about dust shoot after game 1, to be honest. And then the third Saku I think is just kind of mandatory, good against warriors, etc. Could potentially be like a widespread ruin because there are some types, there's like rogue decks that exist where people try to King Dragun lock you and stuff. So it's kind of good to have some cards that don't target. Some cards I think that would be really interesting picks outside the Ashura, the Fairy Meter Crush, Big Bang Shot concepts. I think Lightning Vortex could be really good in the side deck for Warrior as well. Just being able to board wipe is very, very needed against certain decks. So I think that's pretty good. Swords of Revealing Light, I think it's another card I'd probably figure out how to side deck. I think Swords is just I think it's actually a very good card. I'm starting to appreciate certain cards a bit more. I think one of my flaws these days is seeing the game too transactionally, where like you need to net advantage through every card. But I'm starting to see it's a little bit different now. I'm starting to see it differently now, where like even if a card's like a technical -1, there's actually benefits that they can give you, like swords or scapegoat. Like scapegoat and swords are technically negative ones, but the fact that they let you draw for multiple turns in certain situations can be really good, because those extra turns can actually compound into massive advantage if it allows you to get like charities or card destructions, or just survive or see like a BLS. So it's kind of gotten me thinking. Those kind of cards have gotten me thinking a bit, and I think part of it was just playing against them in the tournament. It was just being like, wow, like these are really annoying cards to play against. So long story short, I chose Warriors because it was a low skill. It was a low skill option. It avoided. It was a low skill, but not a no skill option. Let me be clear about that. I don't think I'm a bad player by any means. It's just because I'm out of practice, I was using a bit of self-awareness, and I wanted to stay out of very complicated situations because I didn't think I had an advantage in those situations at the current time. Do I think I can get there if I wanted to? I do, without a doubt. So anyways, I chose Warrior because it was a low-ish skill option, creates very simple game states, and basically my mentality going into this was like let's just not stress about it too much. Let's just like try to have fun, play our best. There's going to be some mistakes made, and there was, and let's just like let's let things happen as they're going to happen. And fortunately, this time it ended up working out well for me. Takeaways is I actually liked Warrior a lot more than I was expecting, and I actually think I'm going to try to work with Warrior a bit more and potentially play it in the future, because after playing it, I realized that I was definitely underselling the deck. I'm not convinced or sure it's better than the Chaos Turbo variants or the like Go Control and stuff. I'm not sure. But I think with a really good side deck and maybe like a little bit of innovation in the main deck, I think the deck could be pretty good. So I'm going to give it some tries, and maybe you'll see me in the top of a tournament at some point with it. Or not. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Peace.